Welcome back to History Class with Dr. W and our continuing discussion of American cultural history. In the last few lectures, we've been talking about the push and pull between upper class and lower class culture and entertainment in the decades following the Civil War. In this lecture, we're going to talk about a form of entertainment that found a sweet spot between the upper and lower classes and found broad appeal throughout the entire country. That is, of course, vaudeville. The most popular form of entertainment at the end of the 19th century was vaudeville. It originated in France and evolved in the United States. It involved a series of short variety acts, including something for everybody. It drew from many sources: minstrel shows, circuses, acrobats and animals, backcountry itinerant storytellers, theater music and comedy, burlesque, and concert saloons. These were the attempts of small-time entertainers to draw crowds, and eventually it grew to become mass entertainment. American vaudeville was created in the 1870s by a promoter named Tony Pastor. Born in New York in the 1830s, he had been a performer in the minstrels and with Barnum. In the 1870s, Pastor put a show together and traveled. It combined some racy acts and proper theater as well. Pastor's show caught the attention of Benjamin Franklin Keith and Edward Franklin Albee, who adopted the idea and brought it to a new level. The pair had been performing in a traveling circus together. They picked up on Pastor's idea and put together a traveling show. It was supposed to be wholesome and family-friendly. Profanity was forbidden, and among the forbidden words were liar, son of a gun, devil, sucker, damn, hell, spit, and cockroach. Keith and Albee became the primary booking agents for vaudeville performers. They knew the owners of the venues, they knew the hotels, and they made the arrangements. Performers had to go along with the program, or they might be blacklisted. By the turn of the century, some 15,000 performers worked under them. Not all performances made the big time. A man named Marcus Lowe operated what has been called vaudeville's minor leagues. Lowe started as a small-time theater operator in New York, gradually expanded, and opened other theaters in neighboring cities. He came to operate more than 100 theaters, mostly offering second-rate talent to lower-class audiences. However, he was still very successful. The audiences were rowdy, and one favorite act was Amateur Night, in which audience members themselves could come up on the stage. Life on the road was draining and very difficult for the performers. They lived out of suitcases, traveling on trains, and staying in cheap, dirty hotels. Still, the vaudeville stage was seen as a prospect of upward mobility. Almost all of the performers came from poor backgrounds. Most were first or second generation immigrants. There are many rags-to-riches stories coming out of vaudeville. Many famous performers started out in vaudeville, including the Marx Brothers, George Burns, Fred Allen, and many, many others. The vaudeville humor began to reflect the shift to an urbanized nation. These were not the raconteurs of the countryside. The humor was quick, involving many one-liners, puns, and plays on words. Through vaudeville, those attending a show could experience big city life, if only for a few hours. There was also much physical comedy in vaudeville. Pratfalls, eye-poking slapstick. The Marx Brothers developed there, a sort of precursor to the Three Stooges. One worry on the vaudeville circuit was having material stolen. It happened all the time. As George Burns recalled, a manager in one North Dakota theater posted a sign listing about 100 jokes and warning, "These jokes have already been used in this theater. Do not use them." Burns noted that nobody used them there, but everybody wrote them down and put them in their act for the next booking. Or, as Milton Berle noted at one point, "He was so funny, I almost dropped my pad and pencil." Vaudeville performers played to racial and ethnic stereotypes. In brief sketches, it is difficult or even impossible to develop true characters, So they established a stable of stock characters, immediately identifiable to the audience, most based on ethnic stereotypes. The stingy Jew, the slow-witted Polak, the drunken Irish Mick, etc. This allowed some native-born Americans in the audience to feel superior over these minorities. In turn, many immigrants performed in blackface and demeaned blacks. Some blacks did tour with vaudeville troupes, but they were almost always relegated to demeaning roles. And outside of the performances, respectable blacks treated them with disdain. It was a lonely, hard way of life. On another level, though, touring groups brought the races together. The groups were a melange of all manner of ethnicities, who had to accept one another and work together. The stereotypes were ugly and demeaning, and of course today would be considered politically incorrect. But some embraced such stereotypes as a source of pride or an opportunity to jab at other groups. As one stock joke of the period went, an Irishman, upon hearing that an explosion had killed 40 Italians and one Irishman, says, "The poor man." Jewish comedians, especially, often poked fun at their own ethnicity. Jack Benny, whose real name was Benjamin Kubelski, was known for his stereotypical Jewish characters. One of the most famous of the vaudevillian actors was Burt Williams, a black actor who played stereotypical black roles while in blackface. He struggled to convince others that he really was not like that off stage. Williams was himself well educated for the time, with a high school diploma, and very well read. He tried to stretch his characters, give them depth, and make them sympathetic. Off stage, though, Williams lived in Jim Crow America. He had to use separate facilities as he traveled with the troupe. He really struggled with this kind of dual identity. With vaudeville, we see the advent of one of the first forms of mass culture in the country. And as one scholar has put it, mass culture uplifted low culture and unraveled high culture, thus appealing more broadly to almost everyone. Vaudeville also weakened Victorian ideals of gentility, social hierarchy, postponed gratification, and morality. There were many examples of women in vaudeville. There were attempts to sell tickets, which often led to compromised morals. More sexualized roles sold more tickets, and controversial women sold well. So there were some who were involved in scandals, and others took those scandals to their advantage on the stage. As one example, 2 women accused of shooting one of their lovers toured as the shooting stars. Some women achieved great success in vaudeville. Comedians tended to struggle, especially those who challenged male dominance. And yet, some noteworthy female performers chipped away at Victorian norms. Several large women thrived on jokes about their bodies. Also, there were others who joked about promiscuity, the stereotype that large people had unrestrained sexual appetites. Others joked subtly about marriage or their husbands. All of these seemed to forge a bond with women in the audience, again chipping away at gender norms of the era. The most famous female vaudevillian was Eva Tanguay, pictured here. She performed with willful abandon and much sexual innuendo. At the height of her career, she earned $3,500 weekly, the highest paid actress in America. She was born in Canada in 1878 and performed in low-tier theater before achieving stardom in her mid-20s, around 1900. Tanguay did not have a remarkable voice, and her body was a bit chubby perhaps, but she still performed with boundless energy, constant motion, and suggestive material. One reviewer compared her to a tornado, a whirlwind, a bouncing bundle of perpetual motion. She shouts, she twists and turns, she is a madwoman, a whirling dervish of grotesquerie. She is unlike any other woman on the stage. Tanguay spoofed advice columns and books on decorum and manners, and mocked the famous ballerina Anna Pavlova. She was flirtatious and exciting without being promiscuous and dangerous. She flew in hot air balloons, posed with tigers for pictures, hunted big game, and generally enjoyed herself. If Tangway is one example, it seemed it was lower-tiered women who could challenge gender norms more successfully, while middle and upper-class women often could not. Another example is the successful vaudeville team of May and Kate Eleanor, who performed skits for 15 years around the turn of the century. They contrasted genteel Victorian women with lower-class women. Their skits were constructed to have the crowd cheer for the lower-class women and be sympathetic to them. A final example was the vaudevillian team of the Whitman sisters, 4 African-American women who came from a proper black middle-class family from Kansas. Their father was a preacher, and the 3 oldest began performing in church, singing Jubilee songs, which were joyful spirituals. They started touring with vaudeville and then ultimately formed their own troupe. They sang songs, danced, and performed comedy. They performed plantation skits mocking the old slave culture. They were considered also a class act with the support of church and reputable African Americans. Still, they also challenged norms and explored more controversial themes. Light-skinned themselves, they would often change clothes and makeup quickly between scenes, in just a few moments transforming from nearly white women in blonde wigs to black-faced women in black wigs. Audiences were often dumbfounded and didn't realize they were even the same women. They controlled the audience's perceptions. They were in power. They also toyed with gender roles. One of their performances included tap dancing, a male activity up to that point. And at times they flirted with the risque, including some burlesque in their act. These kinds of groups and performances disrupted what was supposed to be an orderly, well-mannered world. In our next lecture, we'll talk about another aspect of amusing the millions around the turn of the century and before, when we talk about World's Fairs and amusement parks.